Okay, so how many total zeros does this function have? Why? No. How many real zeros does it have? It has 3 real zeros because it crosses the x-axis 3 times, right? But how many total zeros do we know it has? Why do you say that, Jack? Yeah, it's a degree 3. So we see all the zeros. There's no imaginary zeros in this one, right? Does everybody understand that? Okay, now, I need to teach you how to find them using the calculator. Okay, so this is what you do. See the trace button above it is the calc menu. We've used it before. Hit second and the trace button. And go to number 2, a 0. Go to the calc menu. It's above trace. Second trace. Now, it's asking me for a left bound. I'm going to go find the 0. I'm going to go find where it crosses this left one right here. So I need to get a left bound. Now, some students have been getting confused on what's a left bound. How do you know when it's left and when it's right? I want all eyes right here for a second. All eyes right here. Okay? Here's where it crosses right here. Right here is my cursor flashing. Is that cursor, if I went straight up to the x-axis, is it to the left or to the right of the x-intercept? It's on the left side, isn't it? So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to mark my left bound with that little arrow at the top. And it's pointing to the right, saying my 0's to the right of that. Now it's asking me for a right bound. I hit my right arrow key. Remember, you never use the up and down keys right here. The up and down keys are for switching between equations if you have multiple equations. Okay, now where my cursor is flashing right there, is it to the right or to the left of the x-intercept? It's to the right. I hit enter. Now it puts another arrow up here. They're pointing at each other. In between there is where my x-intercept is. Now it's asking me for a guess. It goes pretty close to it, but if it doesn't, it's okay too. You get as close as you can. You hit enter. And what is my 0? And we are going to round these to the nearest thousandth. How many places is that? 3. Okay? Round it to the nearest thousandth. So there's 1. I want you to find the other 2. If you know how to do it, go ahead and do it. If you're still having trouble, watch me. I'll do it again. The other 2 zeros where it crosses the x-axis. So I'm going to hit the second button and the trace button to bring up the calc menu. I'm going to go to number 2, 0. And I'm going to go over to that middle 0. And I have to have a left bound for it. This time, left is above because it's slanting down left to right. So I hit enter. It marks my left bound. I go to the right. I mark my right bound. And I get back as close to it as I can. Okay, and this one is negative 1.382. Good. 382. If you round it to the nearest, because notice that after the 1 there's a 9. So it rounds the 1 up to a 2. Okay, now x equals negative 1.382. Okay, now I've got to go find the next one. So I hit second and the trace button again. I go to 0. I am going to move over. This time, below is my left bound again. I move to the right. I mark my right bound. That's about as close as I'm going to get to my guess because it's so steep. And notice, what did you guys get? You should have got exactly 2. Sweet. Yeah, sometimes you guys, if you get 1.9 repeating or 2.00000001, that's 2, right? The calculator just depends on where you place your. Oh, okay. That does happen though sometimes. So, okay. So that's how I find real zeros. Any questions on how to find real zeros? Okay, here we go. Next slide. I want you guys to find all the real zeros of this function right here in your groups. I'm not going to go over it. Just you guys do it. I'll come around to see who. Okay, look at this function. F of x equals 4x to the fourth plus 7x squared minus 2. What's the degree of this function? How many zeros is it going to have, you guys? Okay. Now, do they all have to be real? Can some be real and some be imaginary? Could they all be imaginary? Possibly. Okay, what we're going to do right now is this one actually has 2 real and 2 imaginary. What I want you to do is find the 2 real ones using your calculator, and then I'll talk about how we're going to find the imaginary ones. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute. Put this in your calculator. Find the 2 real zeros. What are the real zeros, you guys? Okay. Those are the 2 real zeros. Now, how many total zeros does this have? 4. Why 4? Because it's degree 4, right? So since it only has 2 real zeros, because we use a calculator to find that, what do the other 2 have to be? Imaginary. This is where our synthetic division comes in. Who came up with imaginary numbers?
Why do they exist? They're imaginary. They don't really exist.
Wrong.
That's what throws me off.
Wrong. Let me go off on a tangent here. This is why we need synthetic division. What we're going to do, listen carefully. I want all eyes right here. What we're going to do is we're going to take this 4th degree polynomial. Kendall, you're going to want to hear this. We're going to take this 4th degree polynomial, and we're going to divide the negative 0.5 into it. That's going to reduce it to a x cubed, right? And then I'm going to take that and divide the 0.5 into it, and that's going to reduce it to an x squared polynomial. And the x squared polynomial is quadratic, and we can solve it. We know how to solve quadratic equations. And we can find the 2 imaginary zeros that exist, okay? So this is how we go ahead and do it. We're going to use synthetic division. What number goes right here, you guys?
0.5. No, just 0.5.
Either negative 0.5 or 0.5. By the way, since these are solved, these are not written as factors. This is not x minus something or x plus something. This is x equals negative 0.5. That's the number that goes in front. It really doesn't matter which one I do first, negative 0.5 or 0.5. It doesn't matter. Okay, what are my coefficients across here? 4. Okay, don't forget the zeros. Bring down the 4. We're ready to begin this. So, by the way, timesing by a negative 0.5, so times by 0.5 just cuts something in half, doesn't it? So 0.5 times 4 is what? It's 2. It's negative 2 because it's negative times a positive, so negative 2. Okay, I add, I get negative 2. What's half of 2? 1. But since it's a negative times a negative, it's a positive 1. Add, I get 8. What's half of 8? It's 4, but since it's a negative times a positive, it's a negative 4. Add, I get negative 4. What's half of negative 4? Well, it's going to be, they're both negative, so it's going to be a positive 2. I add those up, and I get 0. Now, should have I gotten 0? Absolutely, because negative 0.5 is a solution to this. And that means if it is a solution, I should have a remainder of 0. Okay? If I don't get 0 right there, I know I did something wrong. Okay? So, look how easy this is. Now, this is my 4th degree polynomial. This is 4x cubed. I want all eyes to see this right here. This is 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus 8x minus 4. I don't need to write it out. I'm just going to leave it right there, and I'm going to divide the other solution into it, 0.5. So I'm going to put 0.5 out here, bring the 4 down, and I'm ready to do synthetic division again. So half of 4 is 2. Oh, this problem's going to work out nicely. Add those together and you get 0. 0.5 times 0 is 0. Add, I get half of 8 is 4. Add, I get 0. Should I get 0 there? Once again. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter. You know, they're going to be 0 anyway. But because 0.5 times 0 is 0, and add 2 zeros together, you get 0, right? Okay. Our remainder is 0. So this 4 is the coefficient for what? 4x squared. Yeah. All right. Okay, Alexis. I'm going to give the assignment here in a second, too. It's written on the board. Okay, so you guys, the reason this is not x cubed is because when I divide the negative 0.5 in here, that reduces that to 4x cubed minus 2x squared and so forth. When I divided the 0.5 into this one, I got an x squared, 4x squared. Do you understand that? By dividing the 2 I had in there, it reduced it down to an x squared. Now, I have 4x squared plus 0x. Do I need the 0x, though? Plus 8 equals 0. These numbers right here are the coefficients for 4x squared plus 0x plus 8. 4 is the coefficient for the x squared. The reason it's x squared, I just explained that, is because when we divide it, see, we start off with an x to the 4th. When I divided negative 0.5 in there, that reduced this to a 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus 8x minus 4. And this one, when I divided 0.5 in there, that reduced that to a 4x squared plus 0x plus 8. Okay, it reduces it down to a second-degree polynomial from a 4th degree because I divided 2 factors into it. Got it? Now, I have to solve this right here. Once I solve that, I have my 2 imaginary zeros. The nice thing about this one is I don't have to use a quadratic formula on this one because I'm missing the middle term, the x term. The coefficient was 0. So this one, I can just get x by itself. So what am I going to do to solve this, get x by itself? Minus 8. So 4x squared equals negative 8. Then what am I going to do? Divide by 4. Before you take the square root, you divide by 4. That gives me x squared equals negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. Now, I can't square root a negative and get a real number. I can square root a negative and get an imaginary number, which we already knew they were going to be imaginary, right? Because we already found the 2 real zeros. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And I get x equals plus or minus. Why do I get plus or minus? It's going to be I. But you always, whenever you have a square root, you take the square root of x squared equals something, you're always going to get a plus or minus. You're going to get a positive and a negative number. Okay? And the square root of negative 2, since 2 is not a perfect square, I'm just going to leave the 2 inside of it. But it's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 2. And what's the square root of negative 1? I. So there's my other 2 answers, positive I squared root of 2 and negative I squared root of 2. Those are my other 2 solutions. I have all 4 solutions now, right? This is a 4th degree polynomial. I have 2 real, 2 imaginary, and that makes a total of 4 solutions. Any questions on that? Yeah, so your homework is like this. There's 5 problems. Yeah, you needed the calculator to find the 2 real zeros, remember? Okay, so here is your assignment. The assignment consists of these 5 problems. I would like you to write them down first. Yeah, write them down. If you're at home watching this, pause it because I'm going to turn it off. Okay. If you want to look it up at home, you can, but I would suggest that you write it down right now and do the calculator part. Get all the real zeros first. If you want to work on the imaginary zeros at home, you can. But you probably have time. We got about 25 minutes left in class. You probably have time. You got about 5 minutes per problem. If you can do a problem in 5 minutes, you'll get them done. Okay?